Joined by George Christensen, the federal member for Dawson. And George is both a friend of mine and one of the most interesting fellows you'll meet in the federal parliament, not one of the cookie-cutter Canberra bubble types. He's a proud Queenslander, and I've had the pleasure of his company over a few dinners. I can't remember whose shout it is next time, but he's got a very diverse electorate that takes in the beautiful Whitsundays. He's got Airlie Beach in his electorate. He's also got agricultural, mining and a whole raft of a real microcosm of Australia. So a number of issues come home to roost with George. Border closures, Chinese take-up of Australian land and so forth have all been issues of concern, as has freedom of religion. The hard left went after George last year and delivered him an 11.2% swing. He came back with a resounding victory, and I, for one, was celebrating. So, George, welcome. What's the mood in Dawson as we end 2020?
Well, thanks very much for that, Catherine. I've got to tell you, they'd need a pretty bloody big cookie cutter if they wanted to get a cookie cut version of myself. But look, the mood throughout the Dawson electorate is probably more positive than it is in other areas. I mean, we're buoyed by the resources sector, also buoyed by agriculture, but I want to have a big shout out for the Whitsundays tourism sector. And I think you just was speaking previously to someone from the Gold Coast, and I've got to tell you, my tourism operators are in exactly the same boat. With the border closures that's just happened, I've got to tell you, it is now dire. You had businesses there that were quite frankly on life support because of the international border closures, which have to happen. We all recognise that. But with the state borders shutting down again, it just seems that they close if someone in Sydney or in another state sneezes now. We are in real big trouble. Tourism Whitsundays told me that just one island resort told them, and I can quote the exact figures, for this month the losses are going to be $440,000 for that one business enterprise, and in January $750,000. I talked to my Charter Boat Industry Association up in the Whitsundays. They said to me, collectively amongst 20 businesses that they'd surveyed just in the week before Christmas, the losses amounting to $1.2 million cumulatively a week. Now, that's immense. There are businesses that are not going to come back from this. So I'm very, very worried, very, very worried for these businesses.
As indeed you should be by the sound of it, George. Did you hear Bill Lang's point that he made that given the businesses are being forced to comply with these restrictions, so some kind of amnesty or waiver for insolvency or some kind of leniency in the trading while insolvent kind of realm might be in order. Is that a matter that's got appeal for you? It sounds like he's got a very good case to put to Treasurer Frydenberg there, and it sounds like some of your constituents may well, through no fault of their own, be facing that kind of problem, through refunding deposits and so on and having no customers. It's not their fault. They're obliged to do that. So is there something to be said for Bill's proposal?
100% there is, because when governments create the problem, even if it's for the greater good, there's got to be quid pro quo. If people are negatively affected and businesses are negatively affected, and quite honestly there are when I look at the Whitsundays, then businesses got to step in to provide support. So, I hear what was said loud and clear. Banks, insurers, all of those outfits that take money off other businesses, they've also got to take a haircut, and that haircut's going to have to be extended while small business is hurting. But let me just not let state governments get off the hook here. Everything seems to be sheeted back to the federal government. But it is the Palaszczuk Labor government in Queensland that's actually closed the borders, that's caused this extra pain for tourism businesses. And I'm going to tell you, there is a moral obligation, even if it's for the greater good. If that's the decision, shut the borders down for a virus that we know has a greater survivability rate than 997 out of 1,000. Well, if that's the decision, then you must compensate. These are real losses. These are actual people picking up the phone, Catherine, that are actually cancelling bookings that these businesses had planned for. These businesses had scheduled employees to be on for. These businesses actually got costs that they've spent now that can't be recouped.
Absolutely.
And the income has just gone out the window. It needs to be sorted, and I hope the state government that's made this decision is now going to provide some adequate compensation to cover these businesses.
That is absolutely, it's heartening to hear a federal coalition MP with the courage to say that, George, because I had one of your colleagues on last week who's running scared from Palaszczuk's popularity in the border closure, but they are pocketing with no compunction federal subsidies on these matters and closing the borders arbitrarily. It's quite staggering. It's time for them to step up to the plate. And where they're having an impact on small business, they need to start making some provision, although they're in debt up to their eyeballs as well, as I understand it.
100%, but there's a moral obligation. You do something, even if you believe it's for the greater good, you do something like shut the borders, and it actually costs businesses money, costs people their jobs. You've got to step in to compensate and fix that situation. If you are thinking that it's for the greater good, then quite frankly, you've got to pay for the greater good too.
No, that's a very important point. Look, George, I want to take you to another issue that I know you've spoken to Alan Jones about over the course of 2020, and it's a matter that's of some concern to both of you, and that has been the steady infiltration of Chinese ownership of Australian dairying industries in particular, arable land, and also you've taken a particular interest in Keswick Island, which is in your electorate. And I'll throw to it just a quick grab there before we take that discussion further.
We're here on Keswick Island, making sure people know this is Australia, mate. Hey! Auntie, auntie, auntie! Oi, oi, oi!
George, tell us the background to that. There's a Chinese company taking the head lease there and turned that into little Shanghai, basically, I gather. And you tell the story.
Yeah, look, that was all the Keswick Islanders around me there symbolically planting the Australian flag just to say that this is still Australia, even though the Palaszczuk Labor government signed off on the transfer of the head lease of Keswick Island to a Chinese company by the name of China Bloom. It is still Australia, and there's ongoing issues between the residents of the island and those who have subleased properties on the island, between them and the Chinese company that now owns the head lease. The issues really revolve around access. There's been access points to the island that have been closed off, new ones established which are really unsafe and below par. I went round on the island there, as you could see in that clip, and went round with the residents to have a look at different things that have been done on the island, and really it was all about closure of access or easy access to sites on the island for the local residents and sublease holders. A lot of it's quite petty, I've got to say, but the situation's devolved that much that really the state government now needs to cancel that head lease to restore things. I'm strongly pushing that. I've got a website campaign, www.reclaimkeswick.com. Some say Keswick, some say Keswick, but whatever, we just don't want it to sound Chinese.
What do you think their ulterior motive is? Is it a 99-year lease? Are they hoping to drive the locals off the island? Is that your sense of it?
Well, only the head lease owners know what they're doing. That's the speculation amongst locals, though, is that it could be a matter of trying to squeeze them out. But really, whatever the case, it has now just got to petty annoyances. But along with that, the overarching issue of not being able to get easily to the island that they actually live on or that they have properties on. They used to be able to fly into the island. I'm told that's shut down. I mean, the island owners dispute that they've stopped flights, but the residents told me they can't fly in. They can't fly in unless they're flying in on the approved helicopter, which I think is at least an $1,800 trip. I mean, it's cheaper to fly overseas when you can on those prices to fly $1,800 from the coastline of Mackay, which is not that far away. It's an hour trip by boat, if that. So, these are substantial problems when property owners and people that actually live on the island are finding it difficult to get to their home.
Now, in closing, George, I want to just go out on one issue that we've discussed also privately, and that is, what do you believe the prospects of getting some kind of viable protection for religious freedom in the next year is? I thought this issue would be dealt with, but clearly COVID's distracted it. But do you think the government's lost its way a little bit here? Its core constituency expects action on this, and I get the impression that it's been kicked down the road and that the government's consulting very widely amongst people who'll never vote for it.
Yeah, look, I think that COVID's obviously meant that there's a delay, but this has to be sorted. We made a commitment at the last election that we would put legislation before the Parliament in the realm of restoring religious freedom, religious liberty, which has really come under fire in recent years. You've seen people sacked from jobs over their faith, over stating certain beliefs that they have that emanate from their faith. You've seen in the past pastors and priests and bishops dragged before anti-discrimination tribunals for talking about elements of their faith. It's just wrong because faith is about belief. When you talk about belief, that's freedom of speech, and we can't have laws in this country that are against beliefs or against thoughts or against speech. So hopefully we can put in place these other laws that are protections to that. And yes, I do worry that sometimes the government consults far too widely amongst people who are not going to be happy about it no matter what. They are probably going to vote against us. They're not going to be happy even at surrendering an inch to the other side. And I think that is very problematic. I mean, you've got groups there that simply do not believe that someone should have the right to state their religious belief about certain topics. And if that's the point they start with, then we probably shouldn't be consulting with those people.
And look, and just in closing on a related point, you're embarking on some theological studies, you were telling me when we had a natter over the phone. Am I going to have to call you Reverend when I see you at the curry place next time, or are you? No,
not anytime soon. But yeah, I'm studying theology for all of my sins, Catherine. But it does actually learning about it and learning about church history, people who are burnt at the stake for the ability to say what they wanted to say. This is a serious matter, and when nowadays we're dragging priests and pastors and bishops before jumped-up kangaroo courts that tell them that, oh no, you've said the wrong thing. You can go to church on Sunday, you can wave your hands in the air, or you can say hallelujah, but you can't talk about certain elements of your faith. Well, that's not freedom of faith. That's not religious liberty. It's certainly not free speech. And that situation should not be allowed to stand in this country. It's a free country.
Absolutely. Constitutional and guaranteed as well.